Wisdom comes not from age, but from education and learning. Good evening all. Myself, Dr. Parmanand Verma, Chairman Webinar Wing, TCO IWA, welcome you all in one more interactive learning session. Today's topic is recent trends in regulatory observations prior to marketing approvals of new chemical entities. And the keynote speaker for this topic is a well-known global scientist, Mr. Bhupendra Kumar Kaushik sir, Director, CMC UCB Biopharm Slough UK. Before start of this session, let me introduce the speaker. Mr. Bhupendra Kumar Kaushik sir is basically from Chhattisgarh, India. He is an accomplished and dedicated pharmaceutical professional with over 13 years of experience in global pharmaceutical organizations. Passionate about making a difference in patients' lives, particularly in drug product, process development, and commercializations. Responsible for developing and implementing CMC and devices regulatory strategy and submission plans for assigned projects, products to deliver timely approvals in alignment with global regulatory strategies. He is Masters in Pharmaceutical Technology from King's College London, UK, and Masters in Pharmaceutics from Dr. MGR University, India. He is presently working as a director CMC in UCB Biopharm UK. Previously, he has been associated with various global organizations like Judge Biopharmaceutical, GW Pharmaceutical UK, Martindale Pharmaceutical UK, GSK Pharma Supply Chain UK, and in GSK Biological Research and Development, and many others too. So let us welcome a global scientist, Mr. Bhupendra Kumar sir. Sir, please over to you.
Thank you, Parma. Thank you for the kind introduction, and I always appreciate people inviting me over. Believe you can hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. And I will share my screen, just if you can confirm that you see my screen. I'm assuming you can see my screen.
Yeah, it is visible, sir. Yes.
All right. Okay. So before I start my presentation today, first of all, I'd like to thank everybody who has actually contributed to prepare for this webinar. Special thanks to the chairman, president, and all the contributing members. As Permanent, who happens to be my junior, has introduced me, I would like to give a bit of a journey about myself to start with, and then we will dive into the world of CMC regulatory affairs. This is quite an interesting time because we just recovered from COVID era, and a lot of companies who actually struggled to file their products at the time now beginning to file their products. So a lot has changed since the COVID, and the market is also adapting to it. Prior to my presentation, I will make certain assumptions. The first assumption that I'm making here is that most of the viewers are here from pharmaceutical background. And other assumption that I'm making here is that people actually understand how the pharmaceutical regulatory CMC submission works in the world. So these are some general assumptions. Throughout the presentation, I will try to keep it consistent and to the point. But at any point you think you need additional information, please do not hesitate to write that in the comment, and we can address those queries in the QA session following our call. On my screen here, you'll see it has a evolutionary picture, which is all about we as a pharmaceutical company evolving to regulatory requirement, but also regulatory companies, regulatory bodies, and regulatory authorities also adopting to change in the global trend with the new drug modalities. So small molecules tend to be a challenge many years ago. Now we have biologics. And to make it more complex, we have cell and gene therapy coming up in the pipelines. So these are different drug modalities. When I look at how I got into this pharmaceutical research world and how actually I have learned, I started in academics, just like many others in the call today. Very basic pharmaceutical education, and throughout the education, I think I had just a little bit of understanding of what the pharma world would look like when I come out of my university. Later on, I joined pharmaceutical industry. That was my preference because I wanted to work in the pharmaceutical research. Um, sometime out of curiosity and sometime out of interest and sometime out of sheer luck, I managed to get promoted in my roles and responsibility. And as you will see, I started quite early back in India in MCure. That was 2005. And gradually I moved up. I had really a fortunate opportunity to work with some of the industrial giants like Merck, GSK, and in GSK, where I spent nearly 9 years in pharmaceutical research, I learned a lot. I mean, throughout my career, I learned a lot in different roles, but at different capacities and capabilities. One thing that was prerequisite for a pharmaceutical CMC director was that you need to have a solid background in pharmaceutical research. You need to know end-to-end process. You need to understand the drug substance. You need to understand pharmaceutical process. You need to understand the analytical methods, and also to understand what is the pharmaceutical regulators requirement. So clear and concise understanding of pharmaceutical regulatory requirements. So likes of FDA, EMA, and basically working with all of those regulators in different parts of the world. In my current role, I day-to-day basis, I interact with the regulators, dealing with their queries, and mostly in relationship to launching a product to which they may have some concern about. Um, this is just a little bit background about my accomplishment, but also how I have actually got into the CMC world. So before I actually go into to details of what actually it entails and what are the clear challenges that we as an industry are facing, I will give a bit of background on how the pharmaceutical submission works. So in any country, whether it's in the US or in India, we have to prepare a dossier. A dossier is a compilation of information about the drug, and the drug it actually is compiled in three different parts, and sometimes it could be in four different parts. So the part that we actually deal with is called quality, and that quality part is actually in the next slide. But before I jump into the next slide, I will give you a bit of a understanding of how complex this is. When a regulator receives a dossier, they are looking at three major components within that submission. So quality, and obviously safety and efficacy. So the quality part that comes from the manufacturing process controls, and also the strategy that we actually define within those processes. The rest of it is about non-clinical data, which comes from animal studies, and then you have clinical data. Clinical data actually is nothing but study done in different phases of clinical trials. So phase one, obviously looking at toxicity of the new drug product, and then it moves to phase two, where you're looking at a slightly larger population, and that larger population will be looking at again mainly safety profile and titrating the dose of the new product, new NCEs or BLA biologics. I mean, and then it goes into phase three, where you have multi-centered, multi-country, and multi-center type of study, where you have a larger population and you're looking at efficacy of the new product. These processes actually are all compiled in a presentative way. When I say presentative way, means it's all written in a document in a particular template, which is called a CTD template for most of the countries, at least in the major markets. And when those submissions are done to different regulatory bodies, as you can see in India, we have our regulatory bodies, which actually is also looking at similar sort of information um, as FDA does. So their review process can take time. And first of all, they look into establishing the safety of the drug product, and then it comes to quality. Why safety first? Because obviously, once the product is marketed, it will be then distributed to a lot of people, and their safety is really important. So objective here is not just to treat, but also to ensure that the drug product is safe for future use. And then they jump into controls. So they look into the manufacturing processes, controls, specifications, shelf life, and everything that goes into quality part of the submission. And that is where actually our role starts. So when I look at CMC, the 4 or 5 pillars that we earlier talked about, so three major ones where we're looking at, obviously, the 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 purity, safety, and strength identity, they are related. They are related in a way that they're all linked to safety of the drug product. One particular part that is interesting and different from the other 4 pillars is quality. And why I say that is because quality section doesn't detail the toxicological or clinical efficacy part. Within a CTD module, you will see that the early start, which is the module 4, which is non-clinical study. That non-clinical study is actually carried out in animals, and then it moves to human. When a CTD template, a CTD format is created, a dossier is created, a structured approach is taken. In that structured approach, this 5 type of categorization is carried out. The part that CMC experts or regulators, at least in CMC department, they look for is module 3, is called quality. And in that quality, we got drug product and drug substance sections. So in a sense, is looking at everything that is done with regards to the development of drug substance and then drug product. We're going to go into the specifics of each sections later on, but just to give you a high level overview of the CTD format, it starts with an administrative review. So FDA will receive the dossier. It's a compilation of all the information, and then they will look at the minor details of you or all the sites that are mentioned in the application, or GMP inspected, is the application form filled correctly, are all the listed sites actually have been, I mean, priorly revisited by them or inspected by them. They have GMP grants and GMP approvals. Then also has the application fee been paid correctly? All that minor details, which most of the time are accurate and correct. Then they look at the overall summary. So this is module 2. Module 2 contains summary of all the other sections or other modules. But again, summary is just to give them a feel of what actually it involves in other modules. And then they jump into non-clinical, clinical, and quality part of it. In the quality part, which is the part that I deal with in my role, we start with the drug substance creation. So this is a synthetic chemistry we're looking at. And from the early discovery phase, the evolution of the drug substance. So you may have a very crude drug substance used in animal toxicological study. Before it goes to human, it gets further purified. The analytical methods may be rudimentary to start with, but then it goes into evolutionary phase, and then you have a properly validated analytical method. So within that journey, you will have a lot of characterization done for the drug substance, manufacturing process defined, and then you have different controls in the form of in-process control checks or different testings carried out at different stages at intermediate levels or as in final drug substance. So you establish your specification, and then from that you start testing the drug substance, so lot to lot variability, different batches, and then to ensure the quality of the drug substance, obviously we try to define certain specification, mostly around identity and quality established by their assay and then evolution of impurities. There are some consideration around how the drug substance is stored, so container closure and then stability profile. Similar approach is taken for the drug product as well, where you're going to have a very early phase drug product, mostly capsules or drug substance filled in capsules or powder, and those kind of early phase formulations are mostly developed in the form of tablets for oral solids, or they go into injectables for biologics or products which have issues with the stability. So again, in different phases, different scales, different type of strategy is adopted, and we call it phase appropriate submission. So within phase 1, the structure of the dossier, the information provided in the dossier would be slightly different than when we actually have a NDA submission. NDA submission will have complete information about all the scale up, all the phases where we have supplied the drug product for, and then you have similar level of control in the manufacturing, obviously the testing, and then development of analytical method, stability studies. In that all, what a pharmaceutical regulator is looking at, and this particular part, CMC quality, generates a lot of queries by regulators. Reason being is that once the drug substance is characterized and its purity is established, the consistency in the manufacturing is well defined, dosed in the animal, dosed in the human, the variability actually can come for future supply from the manufacturing process. The only source of variability may come from, and I'm not saying the only, but I think if we have defined processes and consistent approach, then variability can be minimized. Just to make it a little bit more complex, when you switch from one supplier to another supplier, you may have different impurity level in your starting material. If you switch from one manufacturing site to another site, there may be a different degree of control, different scale of the manufacturing equipment used, different cleaning condition, cross-contamination risk. So there are a lot of variability when you move from one scale. When I say scale, like let's say 30 kg batch to a 50 kg batch, from 50 kg to 100 kg batch. So process scale up brings its own challenges. And then when you have final submission done, regulators will review the content. They will try to understand the flow of the information, and if they need more information around how certain processes are actually defined, what are the deficiency in the submission, and if they need further information, they generate questions. We call them RFIs or RTQs. So RFIs is request for further information. And what you see on the screen here is an example of how different countries see the same content. So here's an example where during a submission of a dossier, we had 37 questions received by FDA in the USA, 57 questions received in Europe by EMA, and then we have 352 questions received by PMDA, so in Japan. You can see for same dossier, which was submitted in three different countries looked at the information from different perspective. Japan went into greater detail. EU obviously was a little bit more concerned about certain information than US. Overall, the chart is showing information in terms of how regulators can review the same content. So there will be obviously um, some differences. Then if you look at the overall distribution of the information, what you will notice is that the spread across different sections is quite visible. But out of all the sections that different regulatory bodies were interested in, they were particularly interested in the manufacturing process of the drug product. There were a lot more concerns about impurities and analytical methods, and obviously the specification. There are other categories where certain questions were asked, but overall, the amount of questions that received for other sections were very minor. So majority, if not more than 75% questions were grouped in four different categories. And why these categories, they get a lot of attention. So what is interesting is these four categories actually brings better control to overall quality section. The manufacturing of whether DP or DS, drug product or drug substance, their analytical characterization, obviously they have to be well characterized. Impurities should be well controlled because impurities can create side effects, can also have some untoward effect. In fact, it can affect the stability of the drug product as well. And then specifications. Now, the specification part is quite interesting because pharmaceutical companies would like to have wider specification. It allows them to have more flexibility because if you have broader spec, that means you can have a longer shelf life. You can also have a less of interference from batch to batch variability and analytical method variability. But regulators, they don't see the information that way. They would want to understand how you have defined your specification. The variability in the specification is quite interesting area itself. So first of all, in order to define your specification, you need to have toxicological data supporting it. So whether everything that you are saying there as in form of impurity in your drug product or drug substance have been tested in animal as well as human and have been proven that does not have a serious untoward side effect. But also batch to batch variability. Have you tested enough number of batches to demonstrate that actually your specification will not fail? A specification is too broad, or your data is suggesting that you have a better control, but you still want to have a wider spec. And then you have analytical method variability. So if you're testing a product, day-to-day variability, lab-to-lab variability, countries to countries variability, which means you can have much more impact on the spec just from the analytical methods. So these particular groups of sections, they actually bring a lot more challenges to pharmaceutical company, but then also to regulators. Now, if we're looking at those two countries, which are the major sort of interest for pharmaceutical companies, just purely because of revenue, US and Europe, what we notice is that US was quite interested in knowing the drug product manufacturing process, which is quite different than how Europe approached it. And sometimes we as in pharmaceutical company, we get confused, like are the pharmaceutical regulators, they're working in close collaboration with each other? And they may well be. Are they talking to each other? They may well be, because one country picks up one set of information and other country picks up another set of information. And what they're trying to do, perhaps in the background, is to establish that everything is nicely singing and dancing. So everything what has been presented for that particular drug product has been well characterized, has been well thought of, has been well studied, and has been well documented. And that is the interesting part of working with different regulators, because then you get to see bigger picture. When we are working in silos and working in own departments, some of us work in the synthetic chemistry, some of work in the scale up in manufacturing, quality, QC, QA, and whatever department. We don't get to see the bigger picture. This is the example of how a pharmaceutical company is interrogated. So somebody who's defending this needs to have a very good understanding of all the different functions, all the different processes, and must have a solid background in the research and development of molecules. With this all information that is submitted to regulatory bodies, and after various degree of scrutinies by different countries, different regulators, we come to sort of an agreement with them that, all right, we're happy to provide you more information. We do not have much information in this space. We will provide more information as it becomes available. For example, stability data, or we don't have enough data to prove it otherwise. And based on what we say to them, they may agree to grant us approval, or they may even say like, look, we're not happy with it. You need to provide us more data. So we go back to the lab, we generate more data, or we say like, look, yes, we think it is a risk, but it's not so because of X, Y, and Z controls in place. So it's always a bit of a negotiation. It's a bit of a juggle between regulators and pharmaceutical company to convince each other to say like, look, we have explored every avenue. This is the best position we can have. And it's interesting on how that actually evolves. I will give you some examples on how they actually raise questions. So majority of the questions they will ask, and we've seen examples of where the targeting is a specification like, okay, so they are clearly telling in first example that, okay, you should be tightening your AC limit because based on your data, we don't accept the wider limit. You should tighten it, and it should follow the latest legislation unless you justify it based on the degradation profile and the stability data. In the second question, they are asking, give us more detail about the packaging material. Is it the same that you always stored at, or has it changed? Is it similar to commercial packing? So they're trying to understand what kind of packaging information or packaging component that we have used. The other one is another good example where they're talking about a specification limit for a specified ingredient. Hello, Jaram, you saying something?
Please mute all. What is that? Please mute all.
Sorry. When we are talking about the third example, they have clearly asked us to provide us more information on the toxicological qualification. So every impurity that we are trying to justify, every impurity that we're trying to register, they must be backed up by toxicological information. Otherwise, your impurities cannot be justified. And this is an interesting area where quality is working with non-clinical and clinical department to understand what level of impurity has been studied, what level of impurity has caused what kind of side effect. Are those side effects are clearly apparent? Are they related to actually the impurity, or it could be something else? So this is where another interesting observation by FDA, where they are obviously trying to understand what kind of impurity is present and how that impurity has been evaluated. Other example that again comes from a specification is like, okay, we need to understand self life and release spec, because you are saying you have changed your analytical method and the new method is much more improved. So based on the new improved method, give us more detailed information on how you're justifying your spec, or they will probably push for tightening of spec because now you have a better control in your processes. So your process has improved, your analytical method has improved, but you're still giving us data from the earlier phases, maybe from earlier clinical phases, which may be wider. And now they are looking at, okay, with improved processes, why are you not tightening the spec? The last one is interesting one where they have observed that we are using single-use bags for manufacturing. From industry generally is moving for disposable system because they don't need cleaning. So once you use it, you just chuck it away, throw it, and you don't have to do much studies around cleaning validation and cleaning maintenance. But then it brings another challenge, because then you need to, most of these bags are made up of polythanes, or polybrick materials, and they actually tend to have extractable leachables in them. So it offers different type of challenge. In one hand, it is convenient, but in other hand, it offers different type of challenge. So they actually, just from these 5 questions, you can see that regulators, they go into greater details. They observe everything that has changed, evolved, improved, and they actually quite keen to know more. They never object, they never question in a way that may feel negative. Generally, they want to know more, and by knowing more, they want to understand the process. And where they need clarity, they will ask for it. And if they don't agree, they will give suggestions, as in first example where they're saying that you should be tightening your SA limit. They're clearly directing you that, okay, we looked at everything, we looked at all the data that you have provided, and we have a feeling that it should be tightened, right? So they can give you instruction as well. So their approach is very collaborative. They were very happy to listen to what we have to say to them. They're very happy to renegotiate based on new data that becomes available. Now, what we are seeing is an increasing trend from regulators, and in this particular plot, what you will see is that they are actually digging deeper in certain areas. I've kind of tried to categorize them in 5 groups. Like they increasingly asking more about, are there any genotoxic material in your starting material, drug substance, drug product processes, even water. They also looking at extractable, leachable throughout the process. So in the starting material, any solvent has been used, any polymeric material has been used, filters, manufacturing bags, and any processes used in the filling. And if the primary packaging material is made of glass or plastic, they are asking for extractable, leachable information from even the bottles now. So they're becoming increasingly concerned about the presence of materials that may come from primary packaging material or from the processes. And most famous and historically has been always the area of interest, especially in pharmaceutical manufacturing, is the data integrity. So the data, I mean, there's been a lot of examples out there, so I'm not gonna go into the greater detail. But data integrity has historically and time and again been the burning challenge for different regulators. So basically, data manipulation um, in a way that doesn't necessarily represent the right quality of the drug substance, product, or process. Then we have presence of solvent. Certain solvents are actually prohibited because of impact on the atmosphere, and generally their concern is about presence of those solvent can also have deleterious effect on the health. So yes, consideration for environment, but also on the health. So they want to have certain control in it. In fact, they have clearly listed what solvent they will accept and what at what level. There's obviously concern about elemental impurities. Certain elements present in higher quantity can have their own side effect, and process comparability. When we move from processes from certain batch size to higher batch size, or when we move from one manufacturing plant to another manufacturing plant, when we move from one type of equipment to different type of equipment, they always want to know how did you establish the similarity or comparability of your drug product or drug substance or the process. So they actually dig deeper. They want to know more. I mean, out of those all five category, data integrity sits at the top. There's a lot of deficiency letters issued in the past, I mean, just in the past 4 or 5 years, and you can see the clear increasing trend in that space. What makes it even more complex, as in CMC and also for regulators, that now, apart from meeting the general requirement, which is what set out in the ICH guidelines, there are specific requirements in certain countries, and they actually are evolving. And we in pharmaceutical company always try to meet their requirements and put that as a part of the strategic development, strategic discussion to then tell them that, look, this is what we're gonna do for this countries. So obviously there's, because of how geographically Brazil and Mexico is located, they need to have their stability studies done at higher temperature, higher humidity, because of obviously the country's weather. Um, China, Russia, they're very interested in understanding how the analytical method was developed, how the analytical testing is carried out. They take the sample, they test in their own lab, and certain countries prefer the QC release, so the release of the drug product in their own countries, so they can ensure that the quality is maintained. So you can manufacture the product, have your release done in your country, send it over to Brazil or China, and they will take the sample from the batch and they will do their further testing. They will not release in the market unless it meets their own requirement. Similarly, this type of requirements are seen increasingly in Argentina and Mexico. This type of country-specific requirements are challenge for pharmaceutical industry because throughout the development of the drug product, it's not always possible to establish clear requirements, and especially the requirements which are not within the scope of ICH guidelines. This is why um, around the world harmonization is requested, is required, and regulators should be taking some initiatives and understanding that certain requirements cannot be fulfilled. Overall, it's always healthy and always helpful that regulators are and pharmaceutical industries are in talk with each other, which is what different consortiums, different platforms, and FDA organize. A lot of those discussions are invited. People actually go to those forums and they present their concerns industry wide, and they're discussed and entertained. Sometimes they have challenges, which both sides they acknowledge, and they work on the science and principles on how to resolve it in the future. So with that, I will conclude my presentation for today. Thanks again for giving me opportunity and listening to me. It's a quite interesting area. Anybody who's worked on the CMC along with the FDA, EMA, PMDA, actually, they can understand how complex the world of CMC regulatory affairs is, but also what kind of background that you need to have to be able to defend companies' position and support product launches. There are a lot of incentives to it. So if you are really expert in the area, you are paid well. But same time, in order to get paid well, you need to have very solid understanding, much better background in pharma research in general, and then need to have analytical communication skills. So those are kind of must to have skills. One thing that I must admit is that what you say how you say, how you write, and what kind of information, how much information that you want to disclose at what stage of submission. It all actually helps to build the story. Um, Sometimes it's also important to understand FDA's or different regulators' approach to certain findings. So giving too much information is also not good, provided that it does not have a negative effect on the business and also the product. Most importantly, patient safety is at the top priority of both company and the regulators, and finding that right balance of how to justify specification based on toxicity is always the good approach. Keeping quality of the product consistent is always is challenging, and as you can see that throughout the evolution of drug product, drug substance, it actually evolves. We all learn from the drug product, and as in company, but also the regulators. And this is why product lifecycle management has become increasingly complex and complex. But yeah, so far so good. We have learned a lot, and I think we are looking forward to face newer type of challenges with the new modalities that are coming in the pipeline. So biologics and cell and gene therapy. Living entities. Most of my content today was taken from a small molecule, and the principles applied on those are also applicable for other modalities. And with that, I will conclude my presentation. Happy to take any questions you may have.
Okay. Right, sir. Now I invite Honorable National President G. Koteswar Rao, sir. Sir, please. Rao, sir.
1 minute. This
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Doctor. Dr. Bhupendra ji, and great to know that you are from Chhattisgarh, and the information what you have provided is something new to many of this and industry, and we are very happy to share your knowledge with our fellow members, not only from the regulatory, it is distributed to industry and other pharmacy professional organizations too. And in future also, we are expecting similar webinars. And thank you very much again on behalf of Drug Control Officers India Welfare Association. And actually, I was supposed to give brief introduction about our association, sir. This is the world's largest drug regulatory association consisting of 1,486 live members across India, including 28 states and 8 union territories. And we are, apart from the main objective of this association is the continuous education and welfare of its members. And as a part of the continuous education, we are conducting every fortnight one webinar and various professional subjects. And this is the 5th webinar we are conducting under the chairmanship of Dr. Parmanand Verma and Dr. Krishna Kumar from Delhi. And thank you once again for your valuable time. I think it is midnight for you, is it?
No, actually, it's an afternoon, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you
No,
very
it's
much.
always a
Over to
pleasure,
Dr.
and
Parmanand Verma.
thank you, sir. Actually, it's quite interesting to interact with such a large organization, but also to hear that you find it useful. It's an area where actually we can all learn and actually benefit from each other, because most of the drug controllers, the way they perceive the product, the way they see the product, it's not just a marketed output. It's a product that has gone through a journey, a product that has been tested, but also a product that may have challenges throughout its life, right? Processes. Just to give an example, to reduce the cost, sometimes in pharma industry we start resourcing the material cheaply, right? Just to reduce the cost, and sometimes the cheap raw materials may come with different type of challenge, right? It may have different impurities. Sometimes we move our manufacturing from one expensive country to another country which can manufacture the product cheaper, and it brings different type of challenges again, because then cross contamination risk, then you have a different scale up, different equipment use, the processes may not be similar, and suddenly you start seeing a lot of product batches going out of specification. And when the drug controllers, they have awareness of this type of changes, when they pick the sample, they can actually start questioning those of, and that is where the review of the product performance over its life period is of quite interest, to then safeguard the public. So it's not just meeting the spec that is important, but also to understand why the variability actually has originated in the first place. So identifying those, and I like to believe that when we apply science to what we do on daily basis, our job becomes even more interesting. So with that note, I'll wish everybody well. Again, I'm happy to take any questions here.
Thank you, sir. Over to Parmanand.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Over to Mr. Krishna, please.
For vote of thanks.
Good evening, everyone. Myself, Krishna Kumar, working as Drug Inspector in Drug Control Department of Delhi. So it is very glad to be welcomed you all by DCOI DCWA for the 6th webinar in the webinar series held by DCOI WA webinar team members. On behalf of organizing team and organizing committee, I would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you for making this webinar grand success. On behalf of everyone here, I extend our deepest gratitude to keynote speaker, Mr. Bhupendra Kumar Kaushik, for giving wonderful insights on recent trends in regulatory observations prior to marketing approvals of new chemical entities. A heartfelt thanks to organizing team for their dedication and hard work behind this scene to run this webinar series. Thank you once again and have a great day ahead. Before conclude this session, everyone is requested to stand up in your places for national anthem. Sir, is the video visible to you and audible to you? Koteshwar sir, can you confirm me, please?
Yeah, you on it.
Okay.
गणमन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
Jai.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.